Hi, I'm Stewart Spinks and welcome to episode 350 of my podcast, Beekeeping Short and Sweet. Patience. All beekeepers need it, whether it's waiting on a honey crop, producing queen cells, or waiting for a new queen to start laying. Patience, patience, patience. Such a shame that I seem to have little of it. Listen in to hear why. Beekeeping Short and Sweet, a beekeeping podcast for the inquisitive beekeeper with a short attention span. A beekeeper, in fact, just like me. This week's podcast is brought to you, in part, by Hive Multi-Guard. So,
when you need a little peace of mind that your bees are safe from dangers of all kind, pesticides, hornets, wasps and mice are no match for Hive 5. The Hive 5 Multi-Guard is the best one in town. Keeps your bees safe all year round. The ultimate solution has been found. It's Hive 5.
The Hive 5 Multi-Guard fits nearly all beehives and makes beekeeping much easier. Hive 5.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Flaming June has started as a bit of a damp, showery month, but I have no doubt soon enough we'll be complaining about the lack of rain and the intense heat, or maybe not. You all know by now how my weather forecasting skills lack accuracy maybe, but hey, I'm just the messenger, not the meteorologist. Suffice to say, it's a bit damp right now, raining on and off. Much needed rain though for the plants, as I talked about last week, and actually I was at one of the apiaries early this morning to collect a colony for a customer, and although it was cool and a little rainy, the bees were busy already getting out to forage and complete all the other tasks that they're busy doing right now. Before I jump straight into the meat of today's podcast, I wanted to thank you all for sticking with me for what has been a major project for me. And now, here we are with episode 350. 350 weekly episodes equates to 6 years, 9 months, something like that. Give or take a leap year, and obviously my poor maths. That said, over 6.5 years of beekeeping chat, and I'm still here only because of the support that you guys give me. So simply thank you for that support. My headline title for this podcast is Beekeepers Need Patience, something that I'm sure a lot of you will relate to. I've found over the years my patience has been tried, tested, and, to be honest, pushed beyond its limits. These honeybees can be very frustrating at times, I'm sure you will agree. This year, not much has happened to change my mind. In fact, just this week, I've been given yet another example of how patient us beekeepers need to be. It was as a result of my impatience that I ended up taking the course of action that I did. Add to that a number of other situations requiring me to be patient, and, well, you just have to sit on your hands sometimes. Let me explain. I can use this morning's beehive collection as an initial example of the patience that's required. It's also a case of having an understanding of what's happening within a beehive so that the waiting game can be better understood, and as a result, I guess making it less frustrating, perhaps. A while back, in early spring, I had a request from a fellow beekeeper for a couple of national nucleus colonies. Now, it's not something I can normally provide, as we don't have national beehives. I do, however, have some national 14 by 12 polyhives for the production of nukes, and offered to provide the bees by using his brood box on top of my 14 by 12 brood box and allowing the bees to move up into that box, thus converting them into a standard national frame size. He agreed. We set a time frame, and I set about converting 2 colonies into these national brood boxes. You'll know we've had a pretty good spring, I'm sure most of you will agree, And the weather has been great, mostly, and there's been plenty of forage out there for our colonies too. The bees worked hard, the nectar flow was plentiful, and let's face it, standard national frames are not the biggest in the world. The area for the bees to draw out is not that great, particularly when you compare them to 14 by 12s or our Langstroth frames. Each standard national brood box was removed from the parent colony, along with all the bees inside, but the queen was kept back in her original 14 by 12 brood box. So once my customers' hives were rebuilt, we ended up with a brood box full of bees, drawn comb, some brood and eggs, but queenless. They were allowed to make emergency queen cells. These were knocked down and a replacement queen was introduced using a queen cage. Each queen was successfully released about 3 or so days later, and by this time we're probably around week 3 almost of this conversion. Another check a few days later, and we have 2 completely different colonies. Hive number 1 has bees that have read all of the books, know exactly what I'm trying to do, have released the queen, settled her into her new environment, and encouraged her to lay lots and lots of eggs. These eggs are now developing into larvae, and the colony is growing nicely. Hurrah! Success! I can't wait to tell my customer and get these bees back to him. After all, it then becomes less work for me. Hive number 2, this one throws a spanner into the works. The queen has been released okay, she's been allowed to lay a few eggs, but now she's disappeared and the few eggs that have been laid have been turned into queen cells. Great! Why on earth do they do that? A perfectly lovely, dare I say it, expensive queen, previously laying well from a growing nucleus colony, introduced into a hopelessly queenless colony, and they encourage her to lay a few eggs before probably killing her and turning those few eggs that she has laid into queen cells. It's just daft. Anyway, my customer collects hive number 1 and understands what's happened with hive 2. We agree to allow a queen to emerge, mate and start laying, as this colony obviously wanted to be in control. 2 weeks later, the new queen has emerged, and I give them another week or so to get her out, mated, and safely back to start laying eggs. And well, you can guess what's happened. She's a drone layer. Isn't that just always the way these things happen? I explain what's happened to my customer. He's fine with it because hive number 1 is doing so fantastically well, and he's busy enough with them. As it happens, the timing of these events meant that it coincided with the arrival of some new queens from Northumberland honey, and I guess somewhat reluctantly, I decided to use one of these new and expensive queens to finally sort out this rogue colony. So, new queen cage inserted. A few days later, I'm back in to see what's going on, and they've successfully released her. She's laid a few eggs, and yep, they've started to make queen cells once more. It feels like I've checked in on them just in time, maybe a day or so later, and the new queen might not have been around anymore. This situation is beginning to frustrate me. I remove all of the queen cells, something around 3 or 4, not many, and resolve to go back in a couple of days later to see what, if anything, has happened, and just to try and check in on that queen. That was at the beginning of this last week, and I'm glad to say they have finally accepted their new queen and stopped producing queen cells. Thank goodness for that. My customer collected them this morning, and finally I can say goodbye to them. I did pop back late yesterday afternoon and have one final brief look, and everything is fine. There's some larvae in there that's just been capped, so no, there's brood in all stages. You just have to be patient sometimes. A while back, I collected a swarm from our secondary apiary at the fishing lakes. It obviously came from one of our hives, and I really couldn't work out which one, as all of our queen-right colonies appeared queen-right with no swarm cells in them. No big deal, really. I just popped the swarm into a hive, set up as a 5-frame nuke, and added a feeder. As an aside, if you collect swarms, Make sure to give them a couple of days at least before you feed them. It encourages them to use what food stores they've brought along with them and is seen as a useful way of getting rid of maybe any disease spores that might be held in the honey. Anyway, later the same week, having fed the swarm, I was keen to see if I could spot the queen and maybe eggs, and would then be able to possibly tell if she's come from one of my colonies. It's not that I have a photographic memory and can tell exactly what my queens look like. It's just that if it's a marked queen, I can usually tell if it's one that I've marked. Anyway, no sign of a queen, no sign of eggs, no sign of any brood of any kind. A queenless swarm? Highly unlikely. Something's amiss. Be patient, I told myself. Sometimes queens can take a while to start laying eggs after swarming. Not that often though. I find most swarms I've collected, the queen and probably the workers too, are very keen to get eggs laid as quickly as possible, and you'll see them in cells that have only really just been started to be drawn out from the foundation. So I leave it another week, still nothing. Then yesterday I happened to be messing around with the John Harding queen rearing setup, more of that in a minute, and what do you know, finally we have eggs. It looks likely it was a virgin queen in that swarm, and she's only just recently got out to mate. Then, of course, I find the hive they've come from, and sure enough, multiple queen cells have emerged. If you leave more than one queen cell, you'll likely lose a swarm. I guess I got lucky here. Just be patient. And that brings me onto our John Harding queen rearing setup. Honestly, it's not been great. Note to self, be patient. I had hoped to bring you news of my queen rearing antics in this podcast, but actually I've delayed doing anything because I don't believe I have enough bees in this setup to produce really good queen cells right now. Another week or two should see me in a much better shape to begin. Let me explain. Good queen production needs lots of workers to feed those developing queen cells with lots of royal jelly. If you have fewer bees, you get less feed and you get poorer queens, generally speaking. You'll recall the setup: 3 nuke boxes joined together with a short piece of plastic pipe with a small square of queen excluder preventing the queen in the outside boxes getting into the middle box. In the 2 outside boxes, we have a queen-right nuke-sized colony. In the middle box, currently, we have 5 fairly empty frames. That's not what I wanted, but it's like that because I was impatient. I popped several frames in the middle box with 1 frame of eggs, young larvae and some sealed brood. What happened was, instead of nurse bees migrating from the outside boxes into the middle nuke box and taking care of those eggs and young larvae, those bees apparently ran back to their parent colony because those were short of bees and they abandoned that single frame of brood that I'd left in the middle box. I'd like to say lesson learnt, but you know how it is. I checked in with these colonies yesterday. I had actually added a second nuke box body on top of the bottom box because one colony was very ready for it, having grown well, and the other, well, it needed to catch up, and I had planned on adding a couple of frames of brood from other colonies. That, as of yesterday, hadn't yet happened. So, in order to describe this for you, this being a podcast, imagine standing behind this setup and looking at a left-hand nuke, a piece of tube, connecting it to a middle nuke, a piece of tube connecting that middle nuke to a right-hand nuke. In checking yesterday, the left-hand nuke, which now has 10 frames, that's 2 times 5 frames in each nuke box body, this left-hand nuke has pretty much drawn all of the new frames of foundation it was given, and the queen has been up in that top box and been very busy laying a lot of eggs. Maybe 3 frames of eggs and young larvae now. In the bottom box, I've placed the Nico Cup Kit queen rearing block in preparation for trapping the queen in it in due course. This the bees have cleaned out perfectly. I put quite a bit of honey and wax on it, but they've cleaned it out perfectly and continue to move over and around it. Hopefully that will mean the queen will accept it too and lay eggs in the cells in those little cups when we get to that stage. In the right hand box, the colony is somewhat behind the other and needed some assistance. They also have a top box but have only drawn out 2 frames of the 5 with foundation, but the queen has started to lay eggs in some of those drawn out cells, so that's good news. How to help them and get my queen cell production back on track? Simply add some frames of emerging sealed brood from other colonies. Now, here's a slight diversion. Another story encouraging you to be patient with your bees, and it ties in with the John Harding setup. I went to another colony in the apiary that had a double brood set up, but that I thought was queenless. At the beginning of the week, I added a frame of eggs to test, hoping, somewhat ironically, that they would produce some queen cells on that frame. Yesterday, I discovered that not only had they not made any queen cells, indicating that they had a queen, but that in fact their queen had just started laying eggs herself, and the colony was in fact queen-right. I'd been too impatient waiting for the virgin queen to mate and start laying. This colony has taken almost 6 weeks to go from queen cell to new laying queen. It really can take an age. Be patient now. The good news is that I was able to remove the now fully capped frame of brood and use that to boost the population in the right hand side of the queen rearing setup. I robbed another couple of frames of brood from other colonies, and don't forget they need to be healthy, and actually filled both left and right hand sides of the queen rearing setup with frames of sealed brood, some of which was emerging. This then will give these colonies a much needed increase in adult bee population, and I won't have to be patient for much longer. The middle box will fill with bees naturally from either side, and we can replace the frame that failed with hopefully a frame of eggs and young larvae using the alley method and then the Nico cup kit queen cell method. All I have to do now is be patient and wait. Well, that's it for this week. For all of you who haven't yet signed up to my Patreon page, I, together with Steph, have been creating beekeeping content for many years now. And if you're looking for some straightforward, down-to-earth tips and techniques, help and advice, then do take a look at my Patreon page. We have over 1,600 individual beekeeping posts, videos and podcasts filled with useful and timely help and advice. My approach is pragmatic and calm, sometimes entertaining, but always with help and support for beekeepers at the heart of what I do. I keep my videos short and concise wherever possible. No waffle, no flannel, just honest beekeeping advice from years of keeping bees. Take a look and join me for the new 2025 beekeeping season. It'll cost you less than a jar of honey that will help you improve your beekeeping. Head over to Google and search for Patreon and the Norfolk Honey Company.